All right, let's get to filming. As you all know, I have 3,270 subscribers as we speak. I'm very appreciative of my subscribers. So today, I'm taking it upon myself to say all 3,270 of your guys' names. There is one catch. Only 650 of them are public subscribers. Those are the only ones that I can see your names. So if you want to be in part 2, when I hit 5K or 10K, subscribe, comment me, and then you'll be in part 2. So I asked ChatGPT to produce the extra names that I need, and it is 75 pages long. I'll be reading all of these names, anonymous or not, to equal 3,270. Let's get started. All right. Oh, what the hell? Wait, let me. All right, here we go. First up, Bobby Sun News, Angel G, EE, Subway No 122 NVCA, King Dylan G, Technical Omnia Shafiki, Bryson Rittenhouse, Ian Extras, Hemat Vlogs, Majestic American Savior, Sub Please, DJ Sin Roomba, Cap Ahmed El Kadwe, Asan Vlogs, Lay Monster, Paradox Box Sky. I'm already bored. I'm literally already bored. I'm gonna die. Oh my God. Kenny Ryman, Dilation Z, Elias Paz 13, Indigo. I got something in my eye. Oh my gosh, this is 30 seconds in. I already got something in my eye. Landon the Ralph Fanner, Caden H ASMR, Rex Colley, Bindon Public 6760, Pritom, Drew Nettles, the Fanita channel, Pisana Disa, Radioactive, Rohan Nigama. Almost got me. Nick 2019 champ. Dude, what is in my eye? Dubro, CMAC44, Kinolo, King Off 786, Tennessee TV Show News, It's King 863, Rushell, Azor, Abu Salem 7, CKR, Criminality, Team AG, Worked on VR, Solos PD, Nightfire, Pyrotech, Atlenberg. That is a really long name. Trey Schmill, Becca Bass, Xlo Long BATM, Z-Dog Enterprise. All right, one page down. Layla, Chillax Chill, Battle 875 Scar, Little Ave, Indian Hieroglyphics, Irishman Streamer, Rapid 10R, Grayson Jones, The Monkey King, Carlitz TV, TPCBLU3, and Polar. Gamers, What Yo, MSB, Lisa Bear, Benjamin Ministries, Elisha Fishing 94, Vikram Swami, Gaming with Deepu, Nathan Lifts, Corey Martin, Cole MVU, Love and Rockets for Life, Mr. Chaotic, Sonic Gamer 2007, Caden, The One Tester, PolyXZ, Elias Gamer 566, King Frog, Hamza Ideally, East Coast 902, Mr. Teen New Gamer, Mr. Galladay HD, A Texas Raphaean, Hindu Rider 1473, Praying No Gabak, The Scott Pilgrim Guy, Console Cove, Carlos Team Green, Reese's Puff VR, Sixes David Jarvis, Nivit 2C26, Rose's Chicken, Jeff Slay, Marshall D. Rakib, JR Bowling 1997, John, Master Chef 15, V2K Guy, Mysterious Ty. Bro, I'm literally already losing my mind. I need water. Oh my gosh. Bro, that doesn't taste great. This is bad. This is bad. We're 100 in. This is really bad. If I mispronounce any of your names, I am sorry. It's just the way life goes. Ace Control, Wit Ted, Seps TV, Jolly Basket Boy, Clutch Hub, Mason 67. 67. Chronic AC. I'm literally 21 years old doing that. Mason DePaul, Paul, Feet Cheese. Feet Cheese. Apple Mose, Gamer Tree, Ethan Jensen Page, Dylan Craft 65, Lewooted, GM07, Jay Nelson, Adrian John Aquio, Anish Vlogs, Yungtae Entertainment, Deadshot Gaming, Mugshek Tex, Brickstucks Does VR, Dooley Trucks Prime YT, Game Roblox and more, Nicholas PC, Nilan FN, Nakota, Brendan Whalen, Troll, Andrew Leatham, Am Kashyap, directed by GK, Pretty Steph XO, Manu Gandu UP24, Country Comparison Man. That's actually a cool name. Salem Can, SKDISJSJDJJDJEJDJ, Scooter, Cat, BB8SOFT, 5-Star Toast, Champagne Laria, Yusum Osu, AWC Gaming, Sergeant Sleazebag, Mr. Preet, HH, Kyle Bannister, Anish786. I need to make sure the mic didn't die. Okay, good. AARUV, 803 TT Rail, Coco Shia, Payson Poor L Box, Your Average Fan SST, SK parentheses Abjur, Treyman Tyler, Boys Music, Spawn X1, Lake Show 2021, YAD NDHM, Mr. T90 Man, Tobster B, Fuck You R, Epic R, Crick Sports .97, Frosty Creations, Israel Vlogs, Clay Edits, MIG, Gangster Cat, TFX Gaming, Thakur Kaladig Singh, AG Gaming, Amazon, Amazing Mawowen, David F. MS Warrior, Cuts Bloxer, Brianna, Booger Sugar, Wavy Sean, FaZe Mayor 1123, Jason Covey, Groku, Maddie P4L, Baka, Caden Crawford, Black 7, WW Joss 1928, EMR Uralakioe, BB Sims Gaming, Trey Wade, I walk down. Shikar, I'm losing my mind. Shikar Tripethi, Chetan Nindo Noir, Not a Gamer, Krevik K, Satam BS, 04 Baby, Gunna Active Archives, Ayo Reverb, Speed Mick Boom, Jace Jackson Place. We are 200 down. Ford Lover, LJ Nation, Cars and Life Unplugged, Ben Alexander Plays Roblox, Alex, Tech, Carsine, Lil Vontae, Luke Terry Vlogs, Aftab, Backrooms Wanderer, M59 Gaming, TM, ARJ, I Am Super Vegito, Fortnite God, Jace, Goliko, Mama Gone Crazy 87, Hisako Orachumore, Borlo Fan 638, Jasmine Love, Rip Shark, Trey Games and Vlogs, Dawson Siberian Doberman Shepherd, It's the Real AT, I Am the OG, Dalen Byrne Gaming and ASMR, Rax, ZedG, Lauren Sanders, Your Random Duck, Rule Jr. Atrevere, Real Cole World, Matthew Fernandez, Keon Meru, MD Island, Kathy Wagner, Anshu Mary, Creeper, Chase G555, Nothing Special, Mr. Swift RR, Pretty Girl Lily, Zomarusso, Clay, X-Band J, Random Dolls, Idaris, Fernando Antonio Constila Quincires, Aiden Choas, Cindy Condura, Aiden. We are 250 down. Holy crap. Abdul Ran Alf Page, Calm Guy Fortnite, Trey Flint, LM314, Bahoon Tech, Dang Nitsy, Brittany Freebuddy, AR Edits 2.0. Oh my. Dude! I need to stretch my neck. I'm not even like halfway through this. Oh. All right, give me some water. Oh my gosh, dude. Where was I? Lori Rose, Omni Chibi, Richard Thaley, Quentin Bridbin, Philip Handshoe, Fat Cunt 83, Nathan Mosty, NG Tang Pong, Roy Waller, Driven by Nando, Love Mitchie, Dylan Mooney, Def Not Devin, Sweetness Kane, Aesthetic Matt, RJ, Low Key God, David Legia, Hornet, Harry Warden vs. John Carver, Abdi Gaming, David YT, Velo, Go Touch Grass. I need to. Seriously, I need to. Souls with Jim, Ravi Kabi Edits, Jack Daniels, Abida, The Art of Thali Makita, The Wandering Wolves, Olivia Brown, Logan Kirsten, Emir1711, Trent Nof Singer, Juan Ortez, Adriel Aquanda, Bounty Hunter Nate 708, YT NCIS, Claire Be Like, Angry Ibn Z Guy, Sky Monkey Pikachu, the Magic Treasure Box, Double Up J, Mackenzie Lakedo, The Love Jason, Brian Downing, Justin Hamilton, Sanjay U Fan Gaming, Dylan Plays Fortnite, Candace Marshall, Maki Salas, Michael Sheen, Two-Time, Weather Drops 4567, Belfast Hood 77, David Navade A. Owen, Rupesh Balive Kumar, GDT Shorts, Travis Jamilio, Colton Kubake, Camry Kowalski, Alejandro Cazares, Amit Patel, Rex Jordan Robinson, Dev No, Saad Ansir, John W. Bobbitt, Sparks Run, Marvel XD, Lo-Fi Sad Environment 123, Davlin Rognier, Paul Walls, Dell, Josiah Ogretti, Sammy Yayo 47, Matthew Ashland, and Maher 0393, Nini Dato, Sandy Rouse, Riper FF, Spongy Boy, Chicken Jockey 319, Dylan Perez, A Traveling Vlog, Jake YT, Music of AK, Your Chili DP Darling. I pressed it. Crap. Crystal Daniels, Goofy Not Here, Red Fox Mad, Video Creator. Halfway. Crystal Glenn, Joel Fortes Brandon, Tyler Nernberg, Is the Family Jones, Sean Cox, Kitty Gamer, Zen Quo, Ghost, Mad Hun 5. Professional Bob Baller, John Wynn, Hanox Harris Kabibi, Lord Skywalker, Scion, It's King Boss 7, It's King Boss 11, Thor Richard, Jay Jones, Manny 23, Elijah HT, Manish, Elgato, YA the Chat King, UR7, Cristano, Keegan Browning, SR Taro, Kaleo 77, Hikarson 3, Wild J Sports, Dylan Robinson, The Villain 1, Travis Stock, Cartel GTT, Manny Santos, Sharia Mira, Hi Bro, Hello, how are you? Chalk Me, LPNASSX, Justin Thompson, Dr. Delicate Touch, Tasir Supreme, Rose White, The Roblox Dude, Perry, Terrafin, That Die Guy, The Gotchi Official, Jordan Belford. I don't think it's the real Jordan Belford. Kimpo, Jojo Roxy is Jer Gamboa, 2GJS. VJ in Windsor, Zacharias Beckerdire, Tyler Steffen, Shannon McCall, Kindog 167K, Cooper Kasi Quillies, 10YT, FF60, Gose, Matt B, Patrick Limlin, Ari Max Allen's Confrontier. That's a realtor business. Thank you. Joel Vandila, Alexis Harrison, Monkey D Bobby, The Real DGT, Shadow Loves You, Samuel Hamborayan, Sebastian Larson, Tactical 10, DG, Deshawn, Nazi, FF, Trend Maxing, Delar Copy Carrot, The G10, Setting Sun, Def Mad, Danish Khalil, Kenny Rages, Dominic Blanchy, Ethan, The PK Games, Huge Blanco, Chase Taylor, Vale, Jana Panda, Beats KA26, Nola Bless, CSS Family, Pentiles Gannier, David Johnson, Stoles, No Man Diham, Monjan Muragan, Barry Bear, Marissa Williams, Dabbox, Noise, VV, Jalen Childs, Mr. Wilson, as Kaz. Don Kamigi 001, Macy Ariel Hammond, Muhammad Adi Fernandez, Sundon Lindier, Tammy Aberneth, AM7, Hieroglyphics, Kukska, Boss Fighter, Raj, Vermeer 10K, Alex Twig, Rachel Hardy, Terry McKnight, Supreme KJ, Roblox Player, 717, Fusion in Swift, 797, Sally's. Oh my God. This is going to take forever, bro. Why did I think this was a good idea? Genuinely. Sally's Fresh, Guitar Rock 973, Ice Bro, Cool Kid Savage, Xavier, Ohio, Rizzer, Angel, Xavier Rodriguez, Carlos, Filmy Update, Sarah Clements, Gurp Singh, Wesley Coles, Dinzik Glass, VQ203, Ali, Chidid, Army Infantry, Lamar, Andrew Garcia, Hamster the Great, Pillows, Die Trine, Steve B, Playboy Farty, Ryan Ferguson, Booty Pounders, all caps, 3 Z's. Marie BR, Hector Roselle, Alex Vlogs. That may be my favorite subscriber. Booty Pounders. If you're watching this, you better comment. Alex Vlogs, Zeke's Explorers, Madison Belton, aka Madison, or Delke Eta, Waterlina, almost done. Perez Edit, Kendrick Luskin, Jason Season, Remos Montalvo, H. Saf, Rilo, Siad Raft, 999 Rovos, Landon Nathan Hastil, Gabe Teal, Noah Lamb, Cole Retos, Random X, Doomslayer, Lucky Sinclair, Chris Timmerman, EO Triple, Kobo Wayne, Matt Wood, Emma Faircloth, Mr. Alex, Zach, Raekwon Coleman, Green Goblin, Unstoppable Kids, American, Zell Mathur, Hayes Baby 129, Ved Qual, Doofman, Eric Sklim, Eric X240, Anna Unique, King of Swag, Rinse C999, The Unknown Content Creator, Kalen Johnson, JT, Kenny Pellis, Boulevard X, King's Heart, Swifty, PMFC, Stan Itzy, Megan Risky, The Orative Cat 1, Mr. Crease Money, Aiden Cook, T-Beam Jr., Potty Weem 12. I'm losing my life right now. I'm literally losing my soul. My voice is gone already. Oh my gosh. Vester Brown, Abdili Al-Kadi, Alchemiton, Carla Van Zeeby, Daniel Bracco, Gabe, Memes Love, Grand Phantom Gaming, B1GK, X Shock ZY, Mario D Lobo, Victorian, Ethan Cartwright, Dylan Pinnock Ghost Badass M, Desiree Bigaboa, VRF XZ, Chrissy Bobs, Bridget Delane, Maxwell A, Julia Bostic, Koth, David, Judo, Parf, Kavada, Gary Salt, 419 Man, Franco Razier, Esar77, Electra 1020, Caleb Arthur, Unique XS, Mandisingard, Lakeem Ramirez, Slayer, Stephen West, Mazada Mohammed, John Moham, David Egg, VHP, Pingu, BDC241, Lee Sullivan, Adida Sasni, Theodore Thaver, View Hong, Joshua Cooper, JTT the Dad. Azter, Pseudo, Russ, Crucial the Crypt, IDK, Assad Hussan, Black Vapor, Ryan, DGO, Darlo C. Carlos, 601, Legit Gamer 21, Amario Hughes, Lickit Split 23, Amari Agunbun, Angu Kanbu, Malankan 0, Valu Badriwo, Blues Fan 77, Fielding Arms, Nick Geeked, Depan Partra, Pat Crooks, Badu Yusuf, Joker 2021 East, I Don't Know, Jody Alivan, Francis Sando, IB Dread, Denzel Torculus, Serial Eater, Albert Cosney, Beast Monted, Rosanel Driver, Christy Lumley, Black Shadow, Matthew Kirkland, W. Sabio 16, Adriel LeBlanc, The Dan Clan, Harry Christo, Austin Forgy, Momo Glove, Micah Amara, Justin Mallory, Trav Hicks, Kevin Weasels, Nice, Cole Kuplick, Bob Muscom, Alex Ramos. I think one more page. Azim 249, Brenna Rogers, Tattered Joker 22, Joseph Lubeck. And we are done. Oh my gosh, we are done with the real subscribers. Since not all of you guys are public, I made ChatGPT do the extra remaining, which I believe is 2,000 some odd and I'm going to have to read it. It is literally 75 pages of stock names like John Smith, Adam Lewis, James Clark, and it is going to take me a way too long time than I ever wanted to do this, but I'm going to do it. Okay, let's get started. I don't have all day. Is it still filming? Oh, dude, it's been 20 minutes. That felt like 35 hours. This better be worth it. Jeffrey Scott, Stephen Harris, Adam Lee, Jacob Thomas, Thomas Williams, Larry Hernandez, Ryan Williams, Scott Taylor, Richard Jackson, Donald Sanchez, Larry Thompson, Jacob Lee, Brian Davis, Gary Moore, Thomas Wilson, Edward Thomas, Kevin Lopez, Gary Thomas, Mark Ramirez, James Williams, David Hernandez, Jake Torres, Benjamin Robinson, Thomas Harris, Donald Taylor, David Sanchez, John Young, Richard Williams, Nicholas Young, Larry Clark, Anthony Clark, Mark Flores, Edwin Wilson, Jeffrey Nguyen, Donald Torres. Since this isn't real names, we're going to speed it up and we're going to just go through it and punch this out. Hopefully this video gets done soon because I literally want to die. And it has been only 20 minutes. My throat hurts. And unironically, this may be some of your guys' real names because they're like really generic. Who knows? Joseph Hill, Thomas Flores, George Garcia, James Walker, Anthony Thomas. Oh, that actually tasted really bad. Charles Thomas, Andrew Flores, Jason Wilson, Jacob White, Paul King, Andrew Hill, Robert Davis, Charles Nguyen, Joshua Wilson, James Johnson, David Martinez, Scott Torres, Josh Brown, Joseph Brown, Adam Hill, Kenneth Ramirez, Jeffrey Martin, Adam Sanchez, Ryan Miller, Joshua Perez, Larry Harrison, Mark Jones, Benjamin Walker, David Jackson, Ronald Harris, Scott Martin, Brian Perez, Jacob Sanchez, Carlos Garcia, Benjamin Ramirez, Brian King, Charles Martin, Nicholas Harris, Thomas Anderson, Justin Walker, George White, Stephen Smith, Daniel Wilson, Brandon Scott, Charles Garcia. I need to put these on. I can't really read this. Scott Thompson, Richard Johnson, Adam Lewis, Mark Gonzalez, James Clark, Matthew Hill, Jason Brown, John Walker, Ryan Johnson, Donald Lopez, Robert Miller, Gary Young, Donald Martin, Kevin Martin, Larry Perez, Charles Lee, Daniel Lee, Mark Lewis, Thomas Jackson, Matthew Robinson, Brandon Walker, Ronald Hernandez, Andrew Taylor, Stephen Flores, Scott Clark, Brandon Lopez, Andrew Perez. Gary Torres, George White, Stephen Lopez, Kenneth Perez, Kevin Garcia, Scott Davis, Stephen Brown, Richard Sanchez, Mark Smith, Stephen Lewis, Brendan Thompson, Larry Jake, Robert Moore, Michael Davis, Jeffrey Harris, Joseph Wilson, Andrew White, Timothy Walker, Jason Williams, Anthony Harris, Joshua White, Andrew Thomas, Larry Brown, Jacob Brown, Nicholas Hernandez, Brian Williams, Daniel Taylor, Adam Gonzalez, Daniel Smith, Jason Thompson, Eric Brown, Larry Johnson, Kevin Wilson, Eric Allen, James Hernandez, Joshua Flores, Joshua Jones, Michael Davis, James Davis, Justin Flores, Kevin Thompson, Scott Jones, Jeffrey Rodriguez, Kenneth Ramirez, Charles Garcia, Joshua Martin, Gary Lopez, Matthew Sanchez, Matthew Davis, Gary Ramirez, Stephen Jones, Gary Rodriguez, Kevin Nguyen, James Miller, Joseph Thompson, Gary Young, Paul Walker, Paul Jackson, Donald Robinson, Anthony Lopez, Brian Torres, Larry Anderson, George Johnson, Brandon Lee, Nicholas Clark, Edward Gonzalez, Joseph Wilson, Gary Scott, John Robinson, George Lee, Gary Hernandez, Brandon Wilson, Danny Gonzalez, Stephen Robinson, Kevin Wilson, Ronald White, Scott Brown, Robert Allen, Robert Jones, Andrew Hernandez, Nicholas Thompson, Brian Perez, Timothy Thompson, Kevin Rodriguez, Michael Thompson, Gary Wilson, Richard Rodriguez, Timothy Miller, Kenneth Thompson, Charles Allen, William Lewis, Charles Johnson, Scott Lopez, Mark Robinson, Andrew Jones, Stephen Rodriguez, Jacob Smith, Ryan Thompson, Timothy Rodriguez, Charles Thompson, John Sanchez, Daniel Ramirez, Ryan Nguyen, Ryan Brown, Steve Young, Brian Lee, Stephen King, Scott Robinson, Steve Rodriguez, Andrew Clark, Ronald Wilson, William Thompson, Brian Johnson, Ronald Harris, Joshua Rodriguez, Justin Allen, Adam Wilson, Jacob Davis, William Martin, Edward Walker, Mark Rodriguez, Matthew White, Robert Martinez, George Robinson, Stephen Williams, Nicholas King, Andrew Johnson, Nicholas Jackson, Larry King, David White, Benjamin Davis, Edward White, Timothy Jones, Jason Anderson, Andrew Miller, William Jackson, Justin Flores, Mark Hernandez, Jacob Thompson. Imagine ChatGPT just generated like the Epstein list and I'm just reading that out loud and then I get off in like 20 minutes. Dude, I maybe lose my mind, honestly. Who knows? Charles Flores, Richard Miller, Stephen Miller, Brilliant Lopez, Ronald Smith, Justin Sanchez, Brandon Nguyen, Stephen Robinson, Richard Taylor, Michael Smith, Eric Perez, Justin Johnson, Kenneth Miller, Brian Sanchez, George Allen, Jacob Wilson, Brandon Clark, Thomas Nguyen, Ronald Harris, Kenneth Thompson, Eric Nguyen, Thomas Miller, Justin Williams, Andrew Davis, Justin Nguyen, Nicholas Smith, Andrew Clark, Thomas Hill, George Ramirez, James Jones, Donald Brown, John Jones, Mark Gonzalez, James Clark, Robert Sanchez, Scott Allen, Mark Taylor, Andrew Young, Ryan Nguyen, Ryan Flores, Andrew Torres, David Hernandez, Thomas Hill, Aiden Moore, Michael Thomas, Richard Taylor, Brian Anderson, Tom Sanchez, Mark Flores. They're just naming, this is football. Larry Garcia, Brian Scott, Thomas Davis, Brandon Johnson, James Thompson, Michael Nguyen, Andrew Young, George Scott, Adam Robinson, George Harris, Andrew Lewis, Donald Andreas, Richard Rodriguez, Joseph Scott, Kenneth Miller, Michael Robinson, Daniel Brown, Jeffrey Wright, Stephen Nguyen, Scott White, James Wilson, Ronald Jones, Kevin Perez, Adam Young, Paul Moore, Ryan Taylor, Mark Robinson, Adam White, William Gonzalez, Adam Gonzalez, Benjamin Young, Ronald Brown, Daniel Davis, Richard Addison, James Robinson, Andrew Moore, Michael Martin, Eric Ramirez, David Nguyen, Scott Nguyen, Benjamin Harris, Eric Lewis, Richard Allen, Gary Jones, Eric Scott, Paul Lewis, Richard Hill, Jason Lewis, Joshua Lewis, Richard Rodriguez, Eric Scott. I've read these names. Jeffrey Harris, Benjamin Rodriguez, Jason Clark Palmer, James Harris, Michael Wright, Gary White, Eric Gonzalez, Charles Allen, Ryan Davis, Ryan Jones, Nicholas Walker, Adam Hernandez, Jason Lee, Andrew Hill, Edward Hill, Ronald Anderson, Robert Miller, Jacob Walker, Ryan Flores, Richard Martinez, Andrew Taylor, Gary Hill, Scott Thomas, Andrew Flores, David Williams, Ryan Davis, Eric Jones, Brian Martin, Jacob Hill, Ronald Allen, Thomas Perez, Jason Martinez, Eric Lopez, Larry Wilson, George Williams, Eric Rodriguez, Andrew Allen, Jason Scott, Michael Taylor, Mark Young, Jacob Lee, Daniel Thompson, Anthony Moore, George Martin, Joshua Davis, Joshua Lopez, Benjamin Sanchez, Benjamin Williams, Stephen Smith, Jacob Thompson, Thomas Lewis, Charles Jackson, Larry Flores, Jason White, Larry Thompson, William Johns, William Young, Eric Sanchez, Stephanie Davis, Michael Garcia, Mark Flores, Brian Brown, Justin Williams, Steven Sanchez, Brian Smith, Jason Gonzalez, Nicholas Smith, Larry Martinez, Stephen Allen, Andrew Hill, James Lee, Jacob Brown, Andrew Taylor, Thomas Rodriguez. I can't even read straight anymore. Like, I'm not even, like, thinking anymore. Page 13 of 75. Daniel Williams, Joseph Gonzalez, Kenneth Lewis, Kevin Jones, Larry Sanchez, William Robinson, Ronald Lopez, Jason Allen, Gary Robinson, George Smith, Richard White, Gary Rodriguez, Ronald Taylor, John Young, and Edward Wright, Edward Wilson, John Garcia, Charles Harris, Joshua Hill, Eric White, Kenneth Sanchez, Jacob Martinez, Robert Nguyen, Thomas Martinez, Jacob Johnson, Benjamin Clark, Robert Thompson, Stephen Wilson, Paul Wright, Daniel Young, Stephen Garcia, Jacob Wright, Michael Williams, Charles Anderson, Kevin Wright, John Smith, Kevin Garcia, Eric Scott, Scott Hill, Anthony Walker, Eric Robbins, Charles Torres, Richard Rodriguez, Brandon Garcia, George Hill, Richard Perez, Benjamin Thompson, Larry Hernandez, Michael White, Jeffrey Hernandez, Paul Williams, Scott Lopez, Richard Torres, William Thompson, Mary Smith, Matthew Smith, Richard Young, Daniel Sanchez, Justin Hill, Charles Garcia, Gary Clark, Ryan Clark, John Lewis, Daniel Taylor, Jason Flores, Adam Garcia, Paul Lewis, Jeffrey Lopez, Jacob Flores, Jason Martins, Matthew Thomas, Robert Hernandez, Mark Clark, Justin Johnson, Adam Garcia, Stephen Davis, Paul Perez, Robert Flores, Gary Hernandez, Mark Robinson, Ronald Scott, Jeffrey Clark, Michael Nguyen, Stephen Jackson, Eric Young, Thomas Walker, Kevin Walker, Justin Harris, Jason Gonzalez, Kevin Johnson, Ronald Williams, David King, Paul Jones, Charles Lee, Brian Gonzalez, Eric Jones, Jacob Jones, Matthew Martinez, Gary Clark, Edward Harris, Kevin Young, Michael Johnson, James Gonzalez, Benjamin Jackson, Mark King, William Lee. David Ramirez, Matthew Martin, Ronald Hernandez, Kevin Thompson, Charles Lopez, Ronald Nguyen, Scott Anderson, Joseph Ramirez, Thomas Walker, Thomas Torres, Kenneth Martinez, Stephen Moore, Brian Torres, Daniel Lewis, Stephen Sanchez, James Jones, Stephen Garcia, Robert Lee, Kevin Allen, Brian King, Ronald Robinson, Daniel Harris, William Smith, Timothy Jones, Jason Perez, William Martin, George Rodriguez, Eric Hernandez. Oh, Donald Harris, Daniel Robinson, Daniel Lee, Ronald Harris, David King, Adam Davis, Kevin Perez, Robert Garcia, Joseph Hill, George Davis, Jason Anderson, Robert Ramirez, Charles Smith, Donald Thompson, Kenneth Lopez, Larry Flores, Jacob Wright, Donna Wilson, Anthony Thompson, Charles Hernandez, Thomas Sanchez, Jacob Wilson, Jeffrey Thompson, Brian Harris, Matthew Robinson, Kevin Garcia Gonzalez, Stephen Brown, Brandon Thompson, Paul Jackson, Kenneth Martin, Richard Torres, Jason White, Ryan Martin, Stephen White, Brendan Rodriguez, Scott Perez, Andrew Lewis, Charles Lopez, John Allen, Justin Johnson, Ryan Sanchez, Dylan Scott, Joseph Moore, Jacob Thompson, Kevin Davis, Joshua Taylor, Scott Ramirez, William White, Scott, Brandon Wright, Brian Davis, Jason Ramirez, Scott Brown, Joshua Johnson, Jacob Perez, Kenneth Clark, Jason Martin, Ryan Rodriguez, Andrew Johnson, Ryan Lewis, Donald Thompson, Adam Wright, Benjamin Nguyen, Scott Clark, Scott Torres, Anthony Ramirez, Andrew Thompson, Brian Scott, Gary Nguyen, George Davis, Robert Garcia, Andrew Torres, Michael Brown, Eric Thompson, Timothy Clark, Thomas Nguyen, Timothy Jackson, Jacob Harris, Ronald Young, Donald Anderson, Brandon Perez, Jason Flores, Eric Thompson, Nicholas Allen, Joshua Lee, Timothy White, Scott Walker, George Ramirez, Scott Moore, Charles Williams, Stephen King, Andrew Jones, Michael White, Andrew Moore, Brandon Nguyen, James Hill, Jacob Johnson, Brandon Lee, Robert Clark, Timothy Miller, John Miller, Ryan Jones, Larry Rodriguez, Kevin Davis, Mark Smith, Justin Wilson, Justin Hill, Charles Thompson, Kenneth Moore, Mark Martinez, Andrew Gonzalez, Jacob Gonzalez. Is it still filming? Let me check. Please still be filming. Oh my gosh, thank God. Oh, Andrew Brown, Michael Clark, Jacob Miller, Robert Harris, John Martinez, Gary Thompson, Ronald Smith, Anthony Hernandez, Ryan Smith, John Martin, Michael Young, Eric Lewis, James Williams, Stephen King, Michael Thompson, Jason White, Gary White, Justin Thompson, Brandon Walker, Richard Hill, William Torres, Nicholas Robinson, Story Torres, Tommy Torres, Charles Moore, Kenneth Wilson, Stephen King, Nicholas Ramirez, Richard Harris, Justin Walker, Daniel King, Stephen Torres, David Wilson, William Thompson, Anthony Ramirez, William Allen, David Martinez, Paul Miller, Brian Wright, Charles Wright, Jason Anderson, Paul Smith, William Lopez, Eric Robinson, James Clark, Ronald Miller, Jason Young, Brandon Flores, Justin Smith, Justin Allen, Kevin Walker, Kevin Allen, Gary Johnson, Anthony Gonzalez, Michael Lee, Michael Clark, Joseph Clark, Edward Morris, Stephen Martinez, John Wilson, Larry Lewis, Ryan White, William Miller, Scott Clark, Eric Moore, Benjamin Young, Adam Wright, Daniel Jones, Jacob White, Devin Torres, Nicholas Flores, Andrew Perez, Andrew Moore, Richard Taylor, William Miller, Thomas Williams, Richard Rodriguez, Stephen Rodriguez, Daniel Lee, Donald Anderson, Brandon Sanchez, Adam Anderson, Thomas Brown, Jacob Thompson, Nicholas Wright, Joshua Smith, James Sanchez, Larry Davis, John Scott, Adam Thomas, Benjamin Scott, Gary Taylor, Joshua Johnson, Eric Wilson, Mark Taylor, Joseph Gonzalez, Jeffrey Thompson, Mark Sanchez, Daniel Martin, Mark Sanchez. That's not a great name to be saying. Daniel Martin, Jacob Jones, James Torres, Ronald Johnson, Nicholas Johnson, Joshua Allen, Jason Nguyen, Larry Anderson, Edward Clark, Torres, Timothy Robinson, Brian Thompson, Daniel Wilson, Brian Brown, Larry Allen, Mark Sanchez, Joshua Gonzalez, Anthony Hernandez, David Walker, Jacob Martinez, Jeffrey Martinez, Edward Ramirez, Paul Hernandez, Mark Clark, Daniel Williams, Ronald Allen, Paul Davis, David Wilson, Robert Scott, Brandon Allen, Richard Davis, Andrew Walker, Andrew Davis, George White, William Harris, Kevin Davis, David Taylor, Kevin Flores, Joshua Lewis, Joshua Jackson, Kenneth Martinez, James Lewis, Donald Hill, Nicholas Moore, Ryan Allen, Ryan Moore, Larry Williams, Jacob Harris, Larry Hernandez, Mark Lopez, Ryan Jackson, William Lee, John Clark, Gary Johnson, Eric Smith, Charles Lewis, Paul Taylor, Andrew Clark, Joshua Ramirez, Thomas Garcia, Robert Robinson, Joshua Allen, Larry Martinez, Timothy Thompson, Richard Thompson, Nicholas Rodriguez, Charles Miller, Jason Williams, Charles Moore, Brandon Torres, Justin Thompson, John Walker, Scott Taylor, Gary Moore, Scott, Anthony Allen, Joshua Torres, Charles Lopez, Matthew Moore, George Allen, Matthew Garcia, Stephen Jackson, Ronald Johnson, Eric Wilson, Justin Perez, Mark Ramirez, Steve Jones, Donald Flores, Gary Flores, Anthony Lopez, Andrew Nguyen, Joshua Martinez, Joshua Ramirez, Michael Robinson, Matthew King, Richard Brown, Anthony Clark, James Rodriguez, Jason Rodriguez, Michael Ramirez, Andrew Perez, Justin Smith, Donald King, Matthew Hernandez, Mark Jones, Scott Walker, Stephen Flores, Thomas Flores, Kenneth Harris, Andrew Walker, Joseph Lopez, Benjamin Lee, Donald Moore, Nicholas Williams, Ryan Miller, Richard Smith, Anthony Martin, Daniel Hernandez, Nicholas Jones, Robert Anderson, and Adam Scott, Anthony Scott, Michael Lewis, Donald Wright, Robert Scott, Stephen Walker, Matthew Flores, Michael King, Joshua Gonzalez, Gary Gonzalez, Eric Clark, Mark Ramirez, Paul Ramirez, Brian Martin, Stephen Scott, Brian Torres, Scott Hill, Stephen Flores, Justin Miller, Robert King, Brandon Rodriguez, Charles Young, Anthony Garcia, Scott Young, Justin Harris, James Jones. You know what's crazy is like you never think, like I sometimes catch myself thinking 3,000 is not enough. Now that I have to read 3,000 names, this is literally making I never thought I would wish for less subscribers. This is insane. Like 3,000 people press subscribe next to my name is insane. I could not be more thankful. This teaches you to be thankful. Suffering teaches you to be thankful. Stephen Walker, Andrew Nguyen, Andrew Moore, Timothy Lopez, Joseph Robinson, Adam Jackson, Thomas Davis, Thomas Garcia, Brian Taylor, Larry Martin, Ronald Johnson, Joseph Nguyen, Gary Brown, Stephen Walker, Daniel Garcia, Adam Taylor, Mark Clark, Andrew Johnson, Andrew Thompson, Daniel Moore, Scott King, Justin Walker, Paul Walker, Larry Harris, Daniel Nguyen, Andrew Smith, Matthew Garcia, Scott Martin, Mark Miller, Richard Thompson, Brandon Jones, Jason Nguyen, Joshua Gonzalez, Brian Ramirez, Kenneth Martinez, Daniel Lee, Robert Davis, Timothy Jackson, Stephen Young, Eric Garcia, Edward Lopez, Gary Anderson, Adam Anderson, James Smith, Anthony White, Anthony Scott, Daniel Harris, Daniel Ramirez, Adam Scott, Mark Brown, Daniel Garcia, Scott Flores, Ronald Jackson, Scott Miller, Jacob Garcia, Daniel Scott, David Thomas, Brandon Ramirez, Richard Williams, James Clark, Larry Torres, Kevin Davis, Edward Lewis, Anthony Robinson, Nicholas Martin, Stephen Johnson, Donald Davis, William Hernandez, Daniel Thompson, Justin Brown, Daniel Harris, Adam Williams, Robert Moore, Williams Hill, John Hernandez, Michael Garcia, Anthony Thomas, Joshua Sanchez, Mark Scott, James White, Andrew Martinez, Kevin Anderson, Nicholas Hill, Adam Davis, James Rodriguez, Gary Lopez, Justin Allen, George Jones, William Allen, Michael Flores, Brian Young, John Perez, Kevin Davis, James Walker, Eric Smith, David Hernandez, Daniel Thompson, Gary Martinez, Gary Rodriguez, Michael Lee, John Ramirez, Jason Thomas, Edward Hill, Stephen Davis, Daniel Williams, Kenneth Williams, Brandon Hill, Donald Nguyen, William Thompson, Nicholas Clark, Brian Hill, Daniel Torres, Kevin Sanchez, Scott Taylor, Timothy Garcia, Thomas Taylor, David Williams, Jeffrey Harris, James Thomas, Thomas Wilson, William Martin, Robert Hill, Anthony Harris, Joshua Harris, Stephen Allen, Robert Young, David Thompson, Michael Hernandez, Nicholas Johnson, Timothy Brown, Richard Williams, Daniel Moore, Scott Davis, Jacob Martin, Anthony Lee, Mark Hernandez, Joshua Gonzalez, James Gonzalez, Andrew Gonzalez, David Clark, Kenneth White, Kevin Perez, Eric Taylor, Justin Hernandez, Paul Johnson, John Perez, Joseph Garcia, Stephen Torres, Benjamin Johnson, Stephen Moore, Gary Moore, George King, George White, James White, Brandon Jones, James Jones, Robert Anderson, Kevin Garcia, Andrew Harris, Edward Hill, Scott Torres, Matthew Harris, Scott Rodriguez, Thomas Lewis, Charles Wilson, Benjamin Moore, Scott Hill, Timothy Anderson, James Scott, Kenneth Sanchez, Matthew Walker, Jacob Wright, Charles Wilson, Joseph Jackson, Timothy Thompson, Paul Walker, Brandon Perez, Richard Brown, Larry Lopez, Andrew Harris, David Wright, Benjamin Lee, Charles Clark, Joseph Johnson, Stephen Harris, Larry Martin, Stephen Flores, Nicholas Allen, Scott Stander, Joseph Lewis, David King, Stephen Robinson, Edward Wilson, James Jackson, Joseph Johnson, Eric Lopez, James White, Edward Johnson, Joseph Lee, Justin Martin, Joseph Garcia, Kenneth Walker, William Clark, Michael Brown, Benjamin Thompson, Kenneth Gonzalez, James Davis, John Miller, Brandon Jackson, David Robinson, Michael Jones, Scott Miller, Anthony Sanchez, Andrew Thompson, Edward Moore, Robert Lopez, Brandon Lee, Larry Perez, Anthony King, Joshua Sanchez, Ronald Martin, Brandon Jackson, Adam Hill, Joseph Martinez, Ryan Moore, Richard Brown, William Williams, Richard Ramirez, James Torres, Ryan Thompson. Is Mike still alive? where was I? Mark Thompson, George Lewis, Robert Harris, Scott White, Anthony King, Richard Anderson, Ryan Williams, Kenneth Rodriguez, James Flores, Kenneth Johnson, Andrew Jackson, Andrew Wright, Stephen Anderson, William Scott, Timothy Stutt. Dude, I'm getting cramps. I'm actually getting cramps from this. Andrew Torres, Mark Smith, Larry Sanchez, Brandon Hernandez, Nicholas Scott, Brandon Sanchez, Paul Scott, Mark Ramirez, Richard Taylor, Nicholas Jones, Jacob Clark, Brandon Brown, Ronald Robinson, Michael Williams, Kenneth White, Robert Rodriguez, Timothy Martinez, Kenneth Walker, Larry Young, Charles White, Michael Davis, John Hernandez, William Lee, Joseph Sanchez, Eric Wright, Jason Thompson, Scott Young, Joshua Robinson, George Jones, Eric Lopez, Matthew Clark, Stephen Lopez, Timothy Johnson, Matthew Thompson, Edward Torres, Jeffrey Thomas, Scott Martin, James Jones, John Smith, Jacob Hill, Joseph Harris, Stephen Taylor, William Nguyen, Ryan Nguyen, Daniel King, Robert Scott, Brandon Miller, Matthew Lewis, Jeffrey Moore, Eric Johnson, Justin Brown, Stephen Nguyen, Donald Hill, Kevin Taylor, Stephen Young, George Garcia, Robert Thompson, Jacob Brown, Brandon Allen, William Walker, Jacob Thomas, Jeffrey Anderson, Donald Thomas, George Scott, Justin Anderson, Eric Johnson, Brandon Miller, Jason White, Ronald Rodriguez, Anthony Davis, Ryan Jackson, Matthew King, Gary King, Daniel Walker, Mark Clark, Nicholas Lopez, Dylan Young, Andrew Lee, Mark Martin, Benjamin Young, Larry Moore, Mark Walker, Nicholas Rodriguez, Larry White, Jeffrey Thompson, Michael Perez, Charles Walker, Richard Martin, Jeffrey Brown, Mark Williams, Benjamin Young, Charles Sanchez, Daniel White, Stephen Brown, John Martin, Nicholas Gonzalez, Larry Moore, Charles Torres, Andrew Taylor, Stephen Gonzalez, Andrew Flores, Stephen Sanchez, Stephen White, John Thompson, Benjamin Moore, Anthony Torres, Brian Rodriguez, Justin Davis, Brandon Sanchez, Stephen Miller, Jason Lopez, Kevin Miller, Andrew Perez, Robert White, Jacob Rodriguez, Mark Brown, George Walker, Jason White, Matthew Moore, Charles Torres, Scott Martin, Matthew Martin, Eric Young, Stephen Thomas, Thompson Garcia, Adam Ramirez, Nicholas Walker, Justin Martin, Kenneth Young, Andrew Gonzalez, Ronald Martin, Thomas D. Sanchez, Stephen Thompson, Ryan Lopez, Ronald Hill, Brandon Allen, Jacob Anderson, Benjamin Martin, Matthew Davis, Stephen Nguyen, Brian Jones, Timothy Lopez, Brandon Walker, John Hernandez, Richard Brown, Justin Williams, Scott Sanchez, Eric Williams, James Rodriguez, Daniel Moore, Ryan Williams, Scott Wilson, William Garcia, Nicholas King, Jason Hernandez, Kevin Walker, Jason Young, Mark Allen, Thomas Perez, Brandon Gonzalez, Andrew Torres, Andrew Martin, Nicholas Anderson, Scott Williams, Jason Brown, Thomas Johnson, Richard Lee, Nathan Nguyen, Donna Perez, Justin Ramirez, Stephen Hill, Ronald Lewis, William Torres, Scott Robinson, Ronald Perez, Michael Moore, Robert Martinez, Ryan Lee, Jeffrey Scott, Nicholas Thomas, Michael Miller, Thomas Thompson, George Gonzalez, Scott Anderson, Stephen Nguyen, Paul Lewis, Charles White, Stephen Flores, Jeffrey Clark, Robert Martinez, Jason Jones, Joshua Clark, Tom Rodriguez, Nicholas Perez, Ronald Thompson, William Perez, Joseph King, Thomas Miller, Ryan Martinez, Adam Garcia, Andrew Wilson, Eric Taylor, Justin Martin, Eric Lee, Joseph Garcia, Timothy Lopez, Mark Harris, Michael Wright, Thomas Young, Daniel Martin, Michael Brown, Gary Martin, Thomas Martin, Edward Williams, Nicholas Jones, Nicholas White, Jeffrey Scott, Stephen Wilson, Richard Lee, William Clark, Stephen Gonzalez, Jacob Johnson, Stephen Davis, Timothy Harris, Justin Hill, Jason Torres, Gary Williams, Nicholas Lee, Michael Hernandez, Mark Flores, Richard Robinson, Scott Martinez, Stephen Walker, Matthew Taylor, Joseph Smith, Ronald King, Paul Wright, Ronald Allen, Larry Thompson, Joshua Davis, Andrew Miller, Benjamin Williams, Stephen Harris, Adam Clark, Brian Allen, William Miller, Matthew Nguyen, Donald Scott, Adam King, George Walker, Adam White, Ronald Anderson, Benjamin Hill, Kevin Garcia, Joseph Lopez, James Moore, Richard Brown, Nicholas Wilson, Andrew King, Stephen Wilson, Anthony Moore, Brandon White, Andrew Rodriguez, Benjamin Robinson, Jacob Young, David Clark, Ryan Martin, Brian Williams, Benjamin Davis, Jeffrey Smith, Thomas Davis, Thomas Thompson, Ronald Perez, Andrew Jackson, Daniel Taylor, Kevin Garcia, Edward Miller, Ryan Williams, James Moore, Anthony Jackson, Benjamin Lewis, Eric Robinson, Ronald Lopez, Adam Lopez, Kenneth Wright, Scott Brown, Ryan Lopez, Justin Walker, Mark Brown, Paul Walker, Scott Hill, Brian Flores, Adam King, Andrew Thompson, Daniel Moore, Gary Walker, Stephen Scott, Gary White, Timothy Martinez, George Torres, Matthew Lewis, Nicholas Harris, Kenneth Anderson, Joseph King, Mark Scott, Adam Young, Joshua Ramirez, Eric Wright, Joshua Scott, Kenneth Williams, Jeffrey Rodriguez, Adam Anderson, Andrew Young, John Wright, Paul Johnson, Justin Lopez, Brian Thompson, Brandon Young, James Lewis, Andrew Scott, Adam Brown, Scott Davis, Benjamin Martin, John Hill, Kenneth Martinez, Matthew Liu, James Taylor, William Scott, William Garcia, Brandon Robinson, Larry Young, Andrew Harris, Stephen Martin, Jacob Sanchez, Matthew Gonzalez, George King, Jeffrey Johnson, Stephen Davis, Andrew Nagreen, Michael Torres, Jason Martinez, Michael Martinez, Kenneth Hill, David Garcia, Matthew Scott, Kevin Jackson, Larry Brown, Jacob Thomas, George Lewis, Anthony Harris, David Moore, David Garcia, Andrew Walker, Brandon Allen, Jeffrey Davis, Ronald Nagreen, Stephen Miller, Robert Jackson, Stephen Clark, James Wilson, Matthew Wright, Matthew Moore, Matthew Jones, Stephen White, Jason Garcia, Paul Jones, Stephen Johnson, Benjamin Williams, Jacob King, Benjamin Hernandez, William Nagreen, Benjamin Torres, Jacob Garcia, Jeffrey Young, Robert Gonzalez, Kenneth King, Thomas Torres, Gary Anderson, Scott Davis, Brian Flores, Edward Lopez, Ronald Gonzalez, John Gonzalez, Jeffrey Gonzalez, Joshua Thomas, Stephen White, Thomas Miller, Nicholas Gonzalez, Benjamin Wilson, Richard Lopez, and Adam Scott, Anthony Lopez, Charles Lewis, Kevin Scott, Richard Thompson, Andrew Thompson, Benjamin Brown, James Sanchez, Jason Smith, Eric Moore. Oh my God. Justin Allen, Robert Smith, Jacob Johnson, Charles Flores, Jeffrey Wilson, Donald Allen, Edward Young, Jason Perez, Andrew Johnson. Oh, shoot. The second camera just fell. Ronald Martin, Richard Gonzalez, Joseph Ramirez, John Wright, Donald Allen, Ronald Naguin, Robert Hernandez, Eric Moore, Anthony Lee, Thomas Young, Jacob Lopez, Paul Johnson, Thomas King, Thomas Naguin, Kenneth the King, Stephen Allen, Brian Thompson, Justin Williams, Thomas Taylor, Kenneth Martin, Kenneth Martinez, Stephen Thompson, Matthew Clark, Andrew Lewis, Mark Ramirez, Jason Clark, Jason Thompson, Robert Walker, Timothy Thompson, Charles Walker, Joshua Thompson, William Clark, Jacob Wright, Larry Lee, Edward Lee, Charles Perez, William Johnson, Michael Lee, Adam Scott, Donald Lewis, Brian Miller, Charles Torres, Larry Johnson, Michael Miller, John Moore, David Moore, Kenny Gonzalez, Brian Sanchez, Kevin Taylor, George Scott, Donald Clark, Jacob Lee, George Miller, Richard Jones, Andrew Wright, Larry Martinez, Jacob Flores, Anthony Johnson, Richard Lee, Stephen Rodriguez, John Wright, James Brown, Adam Gonzalez, Adam Lopez, Eric Ramirez, Timothy Thompson, Donald Rodriguez, Michael Lee, Timothy Moore, Larry Lopez, Paul Torres, Nicholas Scott, Adam Williams, John Flores, Joseph Garcia, Adam Ramirez, Stephen Lopez, Stephen Lee, Timothy, William Anderson, Donald Williams, Edward Sanchez, Daniel Lee, Michael Jones, Stephen Hill, Andrew Moore, Adam Garcia, Stephen Moore, Jacob Gonzalez, Adam Jackson, Kevin Thompson, Brian Clark, Jeffrey Perez, Ryan Taylor, Timothy Wilson, Daniel Jackson, Larry Taylor, Scott Taylor, Edward Walker, Ryan Jackson, Anthony Flores, Edward Garcia, James Brown, Timothy Thompson, William Harris, William Hill, Charles Taylor, Jacob Allen, George Wilson, Paul Wilson, Matthew Moore, Stephen Johnson, Thomas Wilson, David Allen, Brandon Thompson, Stephen Lopez, Timothy Scott, Brian Martins, Timothy Jones, Jeffrey Robinson, Ronald Naguin, John Taylor, Stephen Martin, Kevin Perez, William Anderson, Andrew Taylor, Timothy Clark, Stephen Robinson, Justin Gonzalez, Brandon Perez, Michael Jackson. What? Michael Jackson? Seriously? Timothy Harris, Scott Jackson, Kenneth E. White, Jason Lee, John Martinez, Gary Williams, Charles Clark, John Robinson, Eric Taylor, Donald Jackson, Charles Ramirez, Brian Williams, Nicholas Hernandez, Daniel Williams, Jason Gonzalez, Andrew King, Eric Thomas, Timothy Hernandez, Joseph Martinez, Jeffrey Williams, John Lopez, Stephen Smith, Anthony Moore, Robert Hernandez, Jacob Clark, John Perez, Benjamin Robinson, Joshua Thompson, Nicholas Gonzalez, Donald Martin, Joseph Thompson, George King, Matthew Moore, James Ramirez, George Clark, John Sanchez, Jason Perez, Brian Torres, Jeffrey Walker, Scott, Nicholas Thomas Garcia, Thompson Gutcon, Joshua Lee, Gary Jones, James Thompson, Daniel Martin, Timothy Jones, Kevin Naguin, Joshua Hill, Stephen Anderson, Scott Wright, Charles Anderson, Edward Smith, James Ramirez, James King, Edward Jones, Ryan Naguin, William Lee, Scott Moore, Larry Gonzalez, Brandon Hernandez, Daniel White, William Martin, Stephen Thompson, Jason Anderson, Timothy Walker, Donald Flores, Jacob Allen, Michael Sanchez, Robert Naguin, Nicholas Jones, Nicholas Naguin, Justin Moore, Adam Martin, Donald Brown, Larry Thompson, Nicholas Harris, David Lopez, Brian Scott, Jason Sanchez, Stephen Allen, Joseph Anderson, Ryan Garcia, Adam Garcia. Donald, Matthew, Scott, William, John, Stephen, Andrew, Gary, Timothy, Kenneth, Charles, Ryan, Richard, Ryan, Daniel, Ryan, Larry, Joseph, Anthony, Adam, Jacob, Richard, Stephen, Scott, Andrew, Thomas, Matthew, Timothy, Paul, George, Gary, Anthony, Matthew, Justin, Ronald, Adam, Stephen, Mark, Adam, Donald, Kenneth, Robert, Adam, George, Stephen, Donald, George, Jacob, Kenneth, Daniel, Ronald, Adam, Joshua, Mark, Larry, Robert, Brian, Stephen, Nicholas, Timothy, Edward, Larry, Nicholas, Richard, Scott, Mark, Anthony, James, Brandon, Joseph, Richard, Stephen, Daniel, David, James, Ryan, Nicholas, Thomas, Jason, Larry, Robert, Richard, Justin, William, Jacob, Richard, Ryan, Matthew, Andrew, James, Jason, Charles, Michael, Joshua, Daniel, Stephen, Edward, John, Jason, James, Williams, Charles, Scott, Nicholas, Brian, Ronald, Robert, Ryan, Matthew, Scott, Jason, Kenneth, Stephen, Kenneth, William, Andrew, Brian, Robert, Joseph, William, George, William, Kevin, Mark, Ryan, Joshua, Matthew, Justin, Anthony, George, Gary, Charles, Stephen, Benjamin, Kevin, Michael, Brian, Justin, Jeffrey, Richard, Michael, Donald, Andrew, Timothy, Scott, Ryan, Michael, Adam, Brian, Tom, Timothy, Brian, George, David, George, Kevin, James, Jeffrey, Michael, Andrew, Kevin, Jacob, Edward, Brandon, Timothy, George, Anthony, Larry, Eric, Charles, Stephen, James, Edward, George, Daniel, Paul, Andrew, Paul, Gary, Justin, Larry, Gary, Richard, Ryan, Andrew, Larry, Mark, Eric, Gary, Michael, Stephen, Nicholas, Stephen, Ronald, Joshua, Eric, Charles, Jason, Edwards, Jeffrey, Timothy, Brandon, Jeffrey, Kenneth, William, George, Williams, Michael, Eric, Joseph, Edward, James, Nicholas, Larry, Kenneth, Robert, Eric, Joshua, Timothy, Charles, King, Paul, Robert, Jacob, Andrew, Miller, Mark, Allen, George, Jeffrey, Gary, Daniel, Jason, Justin, Donald, Timothy, Joseph, Donald, Brandon, David, Joshua, Scott, Joshua, Thomas, William, Anthony, Paul, Michael, Edward, Nicholas, Joseph, James, Thomas, Donald, Scott, Charles, Brian, John, Anthony, Brian, Michael, Matthew, Richard again, Michael, Jason, Paul, David, Scott, Jason, Brian, Jacob, Justin, Stephen, Benjamin, Andrew, David, Charles, Justin, James, Jason, Scott, Jeffrey, Kevin, Paul, Matthew, Scott, Mark, Matthew, Jeffrey, Andrew, Joseph, Charles, Williams, Benjamin, James, Joseph, James, Edward, Anthony, Brian, Kevin, Larry, Kevin, Donald, Matthew, Robert, Jason, Joseph, Benjamin, Stephen, David, Stephen, Adam, John, Joseph, Matthew, Gary, Justin, Kevin, Charles, George, Donald, Paul, Justin, David, Gary, Stephen, Brian, Daniel, Brian, Scott, Jeffrey, Timothy, Joshua, Eric, John, Anthony, Jacob, Kenneth, Joshua, Edwards, Mark, Anthony, David, Justin, John, Edward, Mark, Justin, Larry, John, Brian, Thomas, Adam, Donald, Nicholas, Stephen, Mark, George, Gary, Joseph, William, Gary, David, Ryan, Joshua, Eric, Brian, Ronald, Williams, David, Scott, Larry, Harris, Nicholas, Larry, Matthew, Robert, Jason, Jeffrey, Eric, George, Jacob, James, Daniel, Matthew, Gary, Stephen, Mark, Eric, Edward, William, David, Adam, Jacob, Ronald, Joshua, Eric, John, Brian, Robert, Edward, Anthony, Matthew, Charles, Robert, Kevin, William, Adam, George, Charles, Richard, Jason, Ronald, Kenneth, Larry, Charles, Brian, Nicholas, Stephen, John, Richard, Thomas, Edward, Michael, George, John, Edward, Michael, Donald, Matthew, Brandon, Edward, Brandon, Daniel, Benjamin, Timothy, Larry, John, Adam, Brian, Paul, Kevin, Brandon, Justin, Nicholas, Timothy, Eric, George, Kevin, Donald, Andrew, Ryan, Charles, Timothy, Thomas, Donald, Gary, Scott, James, Scott, Anthony, Stephen, Kevin, Justin, Richard, Anthony, Daniel, Robert, Thomas, Timothy, Jeffrey, Brandon, Timothy, Eric, Charles, Stephen, Richard, Brandon, Timothy, Andrew, Justin, Lee, Anthony, Ronald, James, Anthony, Jason, Adams, Mark, Joseph, William, Daniel, Timothy, Kenneth, John, Anthony, Charles, Robert, Matthew, Jeffrey, Kevin, Anthony, Michael, Andrew, Timothy, Richard, David, Daniel, Thomas, Kenneth, Richard, John, Kenneth. Nicholas, Matthew, Kevin, Ryan, Robert, Michael, Eric, Nicholas, Donald, Brian, Kenneth, Ronald, Donald, Jeffrey, Jason, Larry, Kenneth, Nicholas, Andrew, Allen, Thomas, Justin, Edward, Scott, Nicholas, Paul, William, Matthew, Benjamin, Matthew, Kevin, Brian, Joseph, Anthony, Jacob, Donald, Jason, Michael, Anthony, Brian, Gary, Matthew, John, Jason, George, Jason, Stephen, Andrew, Larry, John, Joshua, Daniel, Larry, Robert, Matthew, Joshua, Justin, Kenneth, Justin, Jeffrey, Matthew, Stephen, Mark, Thomas, Michael, Daniel, William, Joshua, William, Ronald, Brandon, Charles, Joseph, William, Brian, Scott, Gary, Ronald, Matthew, Ryan, Charles, Adam, Anthony, Matthew, Benjamin, Jason, Joshua, Adam, Paul, Ronald, Richard, John, Paul, Mark, Jeffrey, William, Anthony, Scott, Timothy, Matthew, Justin, Gary, George, Edward, Anthony, Mark, Scott, Ryan, Thomas, Stephen, Jeffrey, Justin, Anthony, Michael, Matthew, Jason, Kenneth, Mark, Jason, Justin, Thomas, Anthony, Charles, Gary, Ronald, Jeffrey, Nicholas, Brian, James, Ryan, James, Joshua, Nicholas, Larry, Donald, Joshua, Daniel, Jeffrey, Mark, Larry, Jacob, Ryan, Stephen, Jeffrey, Kenneth, Anthony, Nicholas, Larry, Joseph, Adam, Donald, Larry, Ryan, Anthony, Richard, Daniel, Larry, Jacob, Ryan, Mark, Jeffrey, Nicholas, James, Stephen, Timothy, Thomas, Stephen, Matthew, Brian, Daniel, Joshua, Kenneth, George, Stephen, Mark, Nicholas, Edward, Brandon, Adam, George, Michael, Adam, Brandon, Andrew, Hill, Richard, Ronald, Benjamin, Daniel, Stephen, Ronald, Edward, Adam, Jacob, Scott, Larry, Donald, Jones, Benjamin, Thompson, Mark, Richard, Jacob, Anderson, Michael, Daniel, Joshua, Scott, Charles, George, Donald, William, Eric, Paul, William, Stephen, Benjamin, Kevin, Matthew, David, Mark, Adam, Stephen, Donald, Matthew, George, Justin, Stephen, Timothy, Jason, Scott, Anthony, Paul, Donald, Kenneth, Nicholas, Donald, Larry, David, Jeffrey, Charles, Scott, Gary, Timothy, Michael, Robert, Lee, Brian, Eric, Adam, Justin, George, Andrew, Edward, Jason, Paul, Eric, Andrew, Edward, Brandon, Ryan, Eric, Scott, Andrew, Michael, Matthew, Donald, Andrew, Thomas, Larry, Scott, Kenneth, Jeffrey, Matthew, Eric, Stephen, Andrew, Robert, Larry, Stephen. Last page, and this nightmare will be over. This nightmare will finally be over. Timothy, Mark, William, Jacob, Andrew, Stephen, Jeffrey, Donald, Ronald, Thomas, Daniel, George, Paul, James, Robert, Ryan, Matthew, Thomas, Edward, John, Stephen, Adam, Anthony, Jacob, Jason, Joshua, Brandon, and Nicholas Walker. If you want to be a part in part 2, when I hit 5 or 10K subscribers, comment me. Make sure your publics are. Make sure you're. If you want to be a part, if you want to be a part of part 2 when I hit 5 or 10K subscribers, comment me and make sure your subscriptions are public. If they're not public, I can't view that you're subscribed and I can't say your name. Thank you guys so much for subscribing. It means a lot to me. I never thought 3,270 people would subscribe to me. So it's a blessing. Thank you all, and I will see you next week. My voice just cracked.